Hi, Sheila. Thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast. I am so looking forward to this conversation because not only do you have this really great entrepreneurial story, but you're also the author of a really great book on imposter syndrome. And so we've already been chatting, and we definitely should have probably been recording already, but welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Angela. It's really great to be here.
Oh, thank you. I think, like we were talking, we just can't talk about imposter syndrome enough because we think everybody else doesn't have it. Like we're the only one that has it, but you start talking with others about it and it's like, oh yeah, and this and that, and you too. And oh my gosh, I didn't know. And
Yeah.
yeah. So before we dive into talking about your book, can you set the stage for us and tell us a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey and how you came to write your book?
I joined the Army in 1997, and in 1998 I deployed to Bosnia where I was injured in an accident and I was in a UN hospital. And I got a medical discharge for my accident and I continued my education. Ended up with like a obtaining an MS in engineering and working for a lot of great companies. Well, 20 years after my accident, my mom had an accident of her own and she fell in Arizona and rehabbed in Arizona. And by this time, I'm watching my mom struggle with a lot of the activities, same stuff I had struggled with. Like the activities of daily living, like toileting, are the same that they're today. Like a healthcare worker accompanies you for all the activities of daily living. And there are fewer healthcare workers today than there were in 2018. And I had a whole entourage of UN nurses to accompany me, but it was still just horrible to do. But I had the education and the work experience to be like, oh, there's a better way. I can, and so I invented a device and I built a business around this device. And so then the book comes around when I go to pitch the device to raise money and like ask questions to further my knowledge about machine learning because my undergraduate's mechanical, my master's is biomedical. So I wanted to make sure what I was proposing was possible and then to build the understanding of business acumen that I needed to provide the business was I was diagnosed, pathologized with imposter syndrome. And at this time, I'd never heard that term before. And it was like, I do have imposter syndrome, just not in the ways it was prescribed to me at the time. And it made me furious. But at the same time, I was like talking to people about it that I hadn't talked to about it before.
Mhm.
So I educated myself on it. I talked to a lot of people on it about it. And I ended up writing a book because I thought, just like we were talking about, it's something that needs to be just talked about more to normalize it. And because I'm an engineer, I offer 5 personal solutions and 2 cultural solutions to like kind of figure out easy ways that I have used that I have found to muddle my way through.
What I really love about your book is The Seat for Me. Let's make sure we mention the title is that I think we don't think that people who are educated and accomplished and smart have issues with confidence or self-doubt. We just think, we suffer with it in silence. So not only did you put this out in the world, but you're sharing other stories about it. So I would love to know, what is it that you thought was really important to share about the stories that you share in this book?
Well, the main thing, it's not like I went and found people that had imposter syndrome. These are all people I knew, my friends, like people I knew, and they all seem to have it, and they're highly accomplished people. But it's like we were talking, you just don't assume people have it. It's
Yeah.
like they manifest differently in different lives. And I liken it to a monster under your bed when you're a little kid. Your monster looks different. Like in Monsters Inc., all the monsters look different.
Mm-hmm.
They act different to different people. And what amazed me is that all these people had overcome this feeling of, oh, I don't belong here. But
Mm-hmm.
it does seem like the thread that was common to them all is they were doing something where they weren't the norm and it was new.
Mm.
And if you look to the left and right of you and you don't look like the people who've traditionally held that role or this role, or it's something that's new to you, which most people, everybody sucks before they're great at it, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
So I think it was kind of interesting to me how that was something that was a thread throughout. Like it manifests differently, but when you take that first step,
Mm-hmm.
right, it's
Yeah.
hard no matter what.
Mm-hmm. And I think too, women in particularly suffer with imposter syndrome because so many opportunities are new to us anymore. I mean, we're getting to do things that, generationally, we haven't been able to do. So I'm sure being a female in a male dominated career field has got to be difficult. But what really led to your sense of self doubt and imposter syndrome, do you think, when you were creating and trying to get funding for what you created?
It's weird. I can't separate the two, my imposter syndrome and working in a male dominated field. When I worked in a I still do, but like when I first started out, I was told, oh, I don't even like to say this because grown women shouldn't be referred to as girls, but I was told not to act so girly if you want to be taken seriously as an engineer. Well, now 20 years in, I don't feel feminine enough around other females. So, like, you can't separate that. So that's my imposter syndrome, right? So I'm working on that daily, and that's how I have to employ
Mhm.
my simple steps to, like, okay, talk myself up to that I believe I belong here. But that
Mhm.
doesn't mean that I don't freak out when I get a makeup brush and I don't know what it's for, and I'm like, teenage girls know what this is for. I should know what it's for. So, I mean, I just learned what an eyelash curler is, but I have to be like, okay, I have to give myself grace about this. And like, okay, it's okay that I don't know, but just admit that I don't know, learn about it, and then move on. Decide whether or not I need it. And I
Mhm.
think as the working world looked appreciably different
Mm.
30 years ago, 40 years ago, and in certain fields like mine in engineering, right? Like there's very few, very few females. And very few minorities. So those are the ones that are, if you look to the left and right, they're not going to look like the people who've traditionally held those roles.
Mhm.
So I think it's easier for that monster to rear its ugly head and be like, you don't belong here. And especially working moms, right? Like,
Mhm.
how hard is it if and I talk about office spaces and the temperature being set
Mhm.
and women have a higher body temperature than men. So you're cold, and then like you're one of many who don't fit in this space. And then like it's hard enough to, being a working mom, and you judge yourself the whole time. And all of a sudden you're like, why am I doing this? Right? Like, why do I fight all these battles for what?
I love that. So, what were some of the things that you kind of mentioned that you learn about it and you move on? But I bet that there is more under the surface that you kind of worked on to overcome your imposter syndrome, at least enough to run a successful business and do all the things that you did.
So the main one I have 5 things, personal solutions for overcoming imposter syndrome. And my heavy hitter is remembering your past experiences. Your brain is going to tell you why you don't belong.
Mm-hmm.
You need to tell yourself kind of why you do. And whether you can build on anything. Me using a sports ball analogy is ridiculous, but whether you hit the ball in T-ball, or
Mm-hmm.
whether you fill this role so you can fill that role, so you belong where you are, and you need to convince yourself before, obviously, you belong where you are because you got that job, or you got that position or role, but you need to convince yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So remembering your past experiences or your past achievements is like my heavy hitter. And like I use that for everything from, like, when I ran a marathon, I thought, well, when I was in the army, they had me run 2 miles, and then that was my first 5K. I think, talked myself into the first 5K, and then I ran a 5K and won, so I can run a 10K. And I ran a 10K, and so then I can run a half marathon. Like, I built up on that. And I think you can do a lot of things in life by that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's that's the first of the 5. And I think it's the one I use the most.
Mm-hmm.
The second one was just try not to compare yourself to others. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's so natural to figure out
Yeah.
where you fit or where you don't in a
Mm-hmm.
room. And
Yeah.
just realize that you're doing it and that it's just not fair, because you don't know what the other person's doing. And like on social media, that's not reality, right? You don't know what filters are added or what they're posting. It might just be the highlight reel. It's not the real thing. And then, God, this is so hard, is practicing self-grace. It's easily said, but hard to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, yeah, I, when I initially, this is an evolving thing, practicing self-grace.
Mm-hmm.
Initially, when I practiced self-grace, it was like, well, I'm not, tall, so I'm not going to be in the WNBA. I don't have high hand coordination. That's okay. But that evolved when I had pneumonia and I moved and was running a business, and it was like, you know what, my self-grace then changed to, you know what, I have stuff that needs to be done, but I need to heal too. And I need to give myself grace. I can't do both. I can't do the things that need to be done. I need to heal.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then be mindful of your thinking. You're not, I think once you're more aware of how you negatively self-talk, you're going to be more mindful of that. Like, you're going to be more mindful to not beat yourself up.
Mm-hmm.
But, just be mindful, not like, I think it's you're not going to convince yourself that you poop rainbows, but you
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't be convincing yourself that anyway. And the last one I got from my grandma, so it's probably the one I had for the longest, is like, just to keep things into perspective, ask yourself if it'll matter in a year. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of things that I did in my 20s that mattered in a year. Like, they matter now, but I
Mm-hmm.
didn't realize that, I thought, it won't matter if I do this once. That one time turned into multiple times, and I ended up doing it a lot, and it mattered. But sometimes I'd be really heated about, getting cut off in traffic, and it totally doesn't matter in a few breaths. So, and
Mm-hmm.
that's the 5 personal things. But
Mm-hmm.
the one I have used the most is remembering my past achievements.
Mm-hmm. I love those. And what I love most about those and everything that you just said is it's really about doing the inner work. And so much of our lives, we kind of look outwardly to build up our self confidence or our worthiness, whether our teacher likes our paper that we wrote, or mom and dad approve of our behavior, or whether our boss gives us a raise or a promotion, or we get the degree, or whatever it is. And so I think that's where we really run into this point where we go, gosh, like, why does everybody seem more confident than us? Because we have looked outwardly for those things for the fulfillment and the worthiness. So I 100% agree with doing all of those things is definitely going to help you connect with yourself more, and you have to get real with yourself and what you deserve and what you really want to accomplish in life. Nobody's going to give that to you.
Yeah. I wish
So
they would, though. It'd be
I
nice.
know it would be so easy. I would be selling, confidence on the corner, because, it really is a muscle. And, breaking news, we all have it at various times, at various degrees. It is something that afflicts us all. And so, I love just talking about it reminds us that we all have it, and we all have the same, symptoms. It might look a little different, but we do. So let's talk about some of the stories that you shared in your book. And you and I were talking about that a little bit and how those stories can really help you, like you mentioned, not realize how some other people can suffer with self-doubt. And I think too, we have a really important role, especially as women supporting each other in helping to build the confidence and eradicate the imposter syndrome among us, just how we treat each other. So, yeah, talk about those stories.
I I just want to say this. I think imposter syndrome is mostly attributed to women and minorities. And I just think that they're the ones that talk about it most. And I think that's the best way. I mean,
Mhm.
I don't think it's fair. I think it's self-doubt. It happens to everybody, right? But it's called something different depending on what's going on in your underwear. And I don't know that that's fair. And I
Mhm.
do think that it's important to talk about it.
Mhm.
Um, and God, I don't know how to say this, but I love the stories where it's like, oh, that's imposters. Like, for instance, in my own thing, I didn't like talking about like the generator falling on my foot. And I would tell that story in my pitch for like when I was trying to raise money for my business. And I would run through it. I just didn't like talking about it because, and I couldn't figure it. This is recent. Like I wrote the book. I'm pretty much considered an expert in imposter syndrome, but it was like, well, I didn't feel like my injury was enough. Right. And so that's crazy. It's not like I ever want somebody else to be more injured. But, people like they have this idea and it's like, no, I was fixing generators, but it's not because I didn't get harmed in battle, like a grenade didn't go off. But it's like, I didn't feel like that was enough. And I think that like that not enoughness can be manifested in so many ways. And I think you feel it more, like it doesn't, you don't want to show it. You have this armor. And my way of dealing with it was just to speed through it. And the stories, the reason, like, it manifests differently in different people. Like, one of the stories, Mary talks about being an overworker. And she just, like, you don't think about that being an imposter syndrome thing, or at least I didn't. But it was like she didn't feel like what she did was in an 8-hour day was enough. So she had to work more or she had to do more was not enough. And well, we were talking about Peter the male nurse. Like he thought people would assume he was a doctor, so he had to do more because people expected more of him. And what he did was not enough. And that not enoughness is just pervasive. And that speaks to the self-grace thing. Like, okay, sometimes you do what you do. And it's, sometimes you're 110% and sometimes you're operating at 35%. And I think, it's ridiculous to think that we're always going to be perfect. So like the outward validation, we're not always going to have those gold stars to hang up. Like that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But
no, I love that. And it reminds me of me before I realized and was told like you have complex trauma. And being the wife of somebody who had experienced war and had been in convoys and been deployed, I didn't think my childhood experiences were enough to be considered trauma.
yeah, and like enough, right? Like
Right. It's like, so at what point do we decide that we're enough? And I mean, and it's why I started this podcast, because talking to moms and female entrepreneurs, they thought they could never start a business. And what, who gave me permission to do what I was doing? And it's like, we ultimately have to give ourselves permission. And so I think that that's what your book and what you're talking about, that's the bottom line. What are you going to decide that you deserve, that when you're enough, right?
yeah.
I think it's just so important because, the talking about it is just really part of the healing process.
So it's funny you keep mentioning when I wrote the book. When I wrote the book, they said write from your scars, not your wounds. Well, the more I wrote, the more I'm like, oh, this is still, what, like it's not really a wound. But there are so many people who don't realize what's a wound because they don't talk about it. You got to scrub it out and like, I don't know, my mom would talk about, you got to clean it out and it hurts, but then it can heal. And I think that that's kind of what it takes. Like, I mean, it sucks to not feel like enough. Like your childhood trauma is your childhood trauma, right? Like it is what it is. A generator fell on my foot. Thank God it wasn't a grenade going off and I had to jump on it to save people and whatever. Like, thank goodness.
Right.
But what happened was terrible and, like shouldn't have happened.
But what came to mind was that we're judging our own experiences and whether it's enough or not enough, or, and the thing is like you said, it is what it is, but it is what has made us what we are now. And so
that's a very good point. Yeah.
and had you not experienced that, maybe you would not have been inspired to start your business and create this device that is now helping people and has helped you personally. If you hadn't had the situation where you had to raise funds and pitch other people about the device, would you have cultivated confidence or been focused on it in a way where you're like, what is this? Why does this exist? And who has it?
Well, it's funny that you say it like that, Angela, because it's like when I lost my scholarship, first of all, so many things. You learn a lot when you enter in the military. But when I was lost my scholarship and I joined the army, I thought, oh, I'll be smarter and better than everybody, right? Because I was go to the army or go to jail. That's how old I am. And I met so many smart people and they entered the military for so many different reasons. But I learned how to fix all the equipment so that I didn't have to clean a toilet. Like the
Mm,
army makes you busy if you're not busy. And so I was going to keep myself busy fixing what needed to be fixed or helping people who need, who could do the thing.
mm-hmm,
And so when I became an engineer, I knew how the intricacies that I think, again, most women are not taught.
mm,
So I had that. And the military also taught me to stand firmly in what I knew, right?
mm-hmm,
Like I had confidence that I
mm,
knew what I knew. And if I didn't know, I could learn, right? Like I'm teachable, I'm trainable, and this is my bandwidth. And I think that served me in my engineering career. And then so that when I moved to entrepreneurship and I stood in a lot of uncertainty, I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, I don't love that, but it is what it is. It's that same kind of dealing with stuff.
mm-hmm,
And I could handle things differently.
mm-hmm,
Now, I could handle that, but a makeup brush that was confusing to me or eyelash curler was like, what? Like that was that was my kryptonite. I mean, I think and again, like that sounds silly to you and makes you laugh, but it was like, oh my gosh, I was beating myself up over that. Like
mm-hmm,
teenage girls know, like
mm-hmm.
yeah. So I think there's so many things, and I think women entrepreneurs and moms especially can find things. You're never going to be perfect. You're not going to be the perfect mom. You're not going to be the perfect. I'm not the perfect engineer. I'm not the perfect whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But how boring would it be to be that perfect person? I don't want to know that person. I don't want to be that person. I don't want that person as my friend because that would suck. But,
Yeah, it's a storytelling device. If you want an audience to hate a character, you make them perfect.
oh, ooh.
Yeah, so in actuality, in our quest to be liked by everybody, you don't want to be perfect. We think that that's gonna what's gonna make us likable, but in the end, it's really not. Because one thing I love about you is you're so relatable and you're just so honest about the things that you experience with imposter syndrome. And so that's really ultimately what we need to get in touch with. We need to drop the perfectionism. We need to stop trying to be this idea that we think everybody wants us to be and
Yes.
really get comfortable with who we really are and what our shortcomings are, and really just get real with that. And I think that also goes a long way with overcoming imposter syndrome, because I love this idea of women feeling imposter syndrome in the workplace, but it really was an environment that was created for women. It was it was a male world that was created for them, and they had somebody taking care of the family and taking care of all of the things. And so when we try to enter it and be moms and be supportive daughters and aunts and all the things, we feel like we don't fit because it wasn't created for us. So now we're blazing the trail. We're creating what we need. So I love that too.
Yes. Like little things can make such a huge difference. Like you're talking about the office buildings of today, and now people are working from home. I think that's huge to just be able to say, yeah, I'm cold because the office setting is, your body temperatures are different. Like little physiological things. can
Mm-hmm.
make a huge difference. And the comfort level and feeling like you belong.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that helps you feel like you're more feeling like you belong and feeling like you're enough
Mm-hmm.
kind of work together. Like
Mm-hmm.
if you don't feel like you belong, it's very easy to feel like you're not enough. Like you're not gonna keep filling that bucket.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I hope more and more women and minorities begin to create their own opportunities as they begin to understand their own imposter syndrome, and that no matter what your interest is, no matter what it is that you want to do, there are other people out there that want to be a part of it, as crazy as that sounds.
Yes, I think that's true. And I think society has done a deal historically where they're like, you belong here. And even like left-handed versus right-handed. Like forever they were saying, okay, you got to be right-handed. And so they would make people who were left-handed right-handed. And now they know that's ridiculous, right? Like some
Mhm.
people just don't do that. They don't follow. I'm one of those people that I write right-handed, but I do most things left-handed because I was one of those people that was probably geared, right? So I think societal norms are changing, and that's probably a good thing.
Definitely, especially when it comes to us have, very different people having a belonging, because like you said, that's going to lead to more confidence and less imposter syndrome. And then we're going to have more people being encouraged to pursue their passions like you have been. So, Sheila, thank you so much for this conversation. I love your steps. I love your book. If you want to leave a takeaway or takeaways with listeners, what would that be?
To just follow your gut more than what other people say, because your intuition is, that it has your interest at heart. Other people don't know all the things you know. And yeah, that's it.
I love that. And that's actually been a huge part of my confidence journey, because I'm a highly intuitive person who worked so much in a very logical field and surrounded myself with very logical people. And so, me embracing my intuition and my gifts about that, that has been a huge part of me accepting myself and going, I'm really intuitive. I really know, what I should do and shouldn't do about certain things, and I should go with that. So I love that advice. So where can listeners connect with you and get the book and learn more?
So you can get the book at all the places, but the easiest is Amazon. You can get the audiobook, the ebook, or the regular paperback. If you want to connect with me, just go to www.istheseatforme.com and enter your information. I won't spam you, but I'll have your email address and we can exchange emails that way. And then you get a free chapter of the book, audiobook or ebook, if that's your jam, whatever your jam.
I love that.
But
Yeah, people like different mediums, and it's nice to be able to take a walk and listen to an audiobook and do all the things.
oh, I'm big onto multitasking. That's how I consume podcasts and
Yeah.
audio, and it's how I do books. Like I do audiobooks in the background.
Uh-huh.
And then like if it's important, I'll get the book and then like highlight it or underline and
Do all
that's
the things. I love it. Thank you so much for joining us today, Sheila.
thanks. Thanks, Angela.